Hello, everyone, and welcome to the, I believe, 14th in ALNAP's series of urban webinars. We are very thrilled to have with us speakers from World Vision and CRS today, and very thankful to all of you who've joined us as our audience. I wanted to start off by introducing the topic of social cohesion a little bit. I know Aline is going to address this in her presentation in a moment, but I just wanted to mention a few things because social cohesion has been an issue that has come up in a variety of different ALNAP webinars and presentations since we started really looking at this issue 4 years ago. As we all know, urban areas contain a wide variety of social and economic backgrounds, differing ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups, and different social structures that all occur in really dense spatial areas that we know as cities. And the result of this mixture of social relations and structures and hierarchies is really quite crucial in terms of their influence on a city's social cohesion. One of the main challenges for humanitarians trying to work with a geographically defined urban area is a lack of social cohesion. And this challenge is twofold, really, that of understanding the level of social cohesion, and then also of working with a population who may share varying levels of cohesiveness, as well as vulnerabilities. Social cohesion can determine how information and resources are shared. It can influence how neighborhoods are organized, including the strength of the social fabric and social capital of an area, as well as the amount of social control. And the level of social cohesion is often influenced by relationships between host and displaced populations. The level of support available, including aid, can also play a role. And while a lack of social cohesion is a challenge for urban humanitarian response, sometimes it's suggested that the heterogeneity of a population isn't necessarily the problem, that sometimes the challenge is that people don't have a way to come together, rather than a lack of willingness to do so. And while we've seen in very many different cases the documentation of the difficulties in understanding social cohesion in urban areas, there's been few tools or guidance materials available for humanitarians to work from. And that's why we were so thrilled when World Vision published their recent research on this issue, and that we also found the valuable experience of the CRS team in Central African Republic to draw from in this webinar. I'm going to start in a minute by introducing the three speakers, and while I do this, I also wanted to, in a sense, introduce our audience, and to do so I'm going to launch a quick poll. So our three speakers today, the first is Aline. She's the Urban Programming Advisor with World Vision International's Center of Expertise for Urban Programming. Based in Beirut, she currently holds a global portfolio, while in the past she's played multiple roles within Lebanon and in the Middle East and Eastern Europe region. Aline has 8 years of experience in the humanitarian and development field focused on urban programming, with a background in public health, health promotion, and community development, as well as a passion for urbanism. Also from World Vision, we have Dennis Brown, who is currently the Operations Manager for World Vision's Syrian Crisis Response in Jordan. He brings 12 years of experience managing humanitarian programs in 9 countries across, I've got a list of them, but it looks like all the continents in the world. Dennis has overseen programming in all major humanitarian sectors and has been working specifically on the Syrian refugee crisis for 3 years, for 1 year in Lebanon with DRC, and most recently now in Jordan for 2 years with World Vision International. Finally, we have Robert or Bob Grolsma, who is the Africa Justice and Peace Building Working Group Team Leader for Catholic Relief Services, or CRS. His interest in social cohesion has been inspired by his work on politics, conflict, peace building, and stabilization in fragile state contexts, including Central African Republic, the DRC, Guinea, South Sudan, and Northern Kenya. He has an MPIA in Public and International Affairs from the University of Pittsburgh and a PhD in Political Science from Indiana University. And now we've heard a bit about our speakers. I'm going to share the results of this poll with everyone. Today, most of our audience has some understanding of urban social cohesion. That's 50% of you on the fourth response down the screen. The second highest was 22% with "I'm completely new to understanding social cohesion." We also have 8% with some non-urban understanding of social cohesion, and 17% who know a lot about social cohesion, but not necessarily in urban contexts, with a final 3% who are very knowledgeable about urban social cohesion. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our first speaker, and here she is, Aline.
Thank you, Leah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Leah and ALNAP, for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. As Leah introduced, in the next 5 minutes or so, I'll be speaking about why social cohesion matters in urban settings and what World Vision has done about it. And then I will hand over to my colleague Dennis Brown, Operations Manager in our Jordan office, who will speak more about the topic from an operational and practical perspective. Let's start with the facts. There's not a widely held, theoretically driven, clearly articulated and reasonably operationalized definition of social cohesion. We loosely define social cohesion as the nature and set of relationship between individuals and groups in a particular environment, which we're calling horizontal social cohesion, and between those individuals and groups and the institutions that govern them in a particular environment, which we are going to refer to as vertical social cohesion. What we know is that changing and multiple identities interfere with social cohesion. Social cohesion requires an understanding of social networks, and in situations of deteriorating or low social cohesion, the manifestation will include tensions, instability, social fragmentation, which can be measured by using indicators like frequency of violent intergroup incidences such as harassment, bullying, discrimination, isolation, or communication of negative feelings like negative stereotypes, scapegoating, intergroup anxiety, and perceptions of threat. Having this in mind, why does social cohesion matter in urban settings? 5 years of civil war in Syria have generated a massive protracted displacement of over 7 million internally displaced and over 4 million refugees, the majority of whom are residing in non-camp and urban settings in countries like Lebanon and Jordan. This is causing new and diverse challenges to authorities, humanitarian actors, and receiving host communities. The influx of Syrian refugees to Lebanon particularly is contributing to a situation of rapid, unsustainable urbanization in an already fragile context. This situation has worsened existing vulnerabilities and has increased pressure on underfunded and under-equipped local municipalities to provide basic urban services. Because the urban context is characterized by complex, fluid, diverse, and interconnected communities, underlying structural vulnerabilities can intensify inequality, resource scarcity, competition, social conflict, and protection challenges during crisis. It's no surprise, therefore, that tensions have emerged between refugees and host communities and between local communities and those who administer them. Studies now show rising social tensions between communities have multiple critical consequences. Among them are two very important ones, which are the potential to generate a secondary conflict in host countries, and the second one is the huge consequence on equitable access to public spaces, urban governance, and access to basic services, as well as livelihood opportunities and humanitarian and development assistance. So, for example, as tensions rise, so too does the isolation of refugee families from the fabric of urban social life. So, for example, Syrian women preferring to avoid harassment or negative stereotyping in public spaces remain at home, an unfortunate coping mechanism that reduces access to social capital in the community. Children, too, are adversely affected as families prefer not to send their children to school for fear or discrimination or harassment, which in turn can increase segregation and further social tensions. It's also widely held that humanitarian and development interventions can directly or indirectly contribute to increased tensions in the communities. Poorly planned aid can contribute to increased divisions between competing groups. It can also undermine local conflict resolution institutions and exacerbate power inequities. In urban environments, for example, where displaced communities often reside alongside the non-displaced, but in the many ways equally vulnerable urban poor, and where complex, heavy monetized systems mean that health, education, housing, and food are deeply embedded in market systems, response efforts can no longer be sector or beneficiary-centric. So opportunities exist. New research suggests that refugee economies can positively contribute to the environments, generating vibrant, thriving economic systems. and that humanitarian programming could unlock ways to enable those economic systems to be channeled to the benefit of refugees, host states, and donors. Education provides another opportunity. On the one hand, conflict disrupts the teacher education system, destroys the physical infrastructure, the schools, and promotes a culture of violence that impacts classroom pedagogy. When available, can also influence government, all of which can reduce political instability and cyclical violence. So having all of this in mind, what have we done about it? Over the course of the past year, we've embarked on a lengthy process of trying to answer two questions. First, how is social cohesion in urban settings in Lebanon and Jordan currently understood? And second, how is social cohesion currently operationalized in the context of the Syria response? We started what we called a peer action learning project. What I just shared with you, and I will be sharing with you during the Q&A today, is the outcome of the first phase of the project, which entailed a literature review that you can access in the handouts click on the GoToWebinar. The literature review aimed to identify gaps and accordingly come up with evidence-based program designs for further exploration through direct implementation and continued research. So we identified a preliminary database of over 625 sources. We then narrowed them down to 66 prioritized documents. It's by no means meant to be an exhaustive study, but rather a guiding framework for approaching social cohesion in urban humanitarian emergency response settings. So it's a scan of current and ongoing studies, policies, projects, and tools that can be used to make decisions on how to mobilize best practices when such practices exist and address gaps were identified. What did we find out? The review allowed us to understand that drivers of social tensions can be organized into three main categories. There are structural vulnerabilities that predate the Syrian crisis, such as the high level of poverty, resource scarcity, and lack of effective governing institutions or weak governing institutions. The second category is socioeconomic, religious, and cultural norms differences between refugees and host communities, as well as lack of social networks. And the third one includes proximate causes, which are the core issues resulting from the demographic shifts driven by massive displacement. So by proximate causes, we mean access, affordability, and quality of housing, economic competition over livelihood opportunities, access to and quality of basic education and basic public goods and services. So talking about water, electricity, solid waste collection, healthcare. Also included in proximate causes are the role of international aid in terms of perception of fairness of distribution, availability, and perception of inequity, unfairness, and even corruption, and the role of social, local, and international media and framing those issues. In addition to this, we learned that history and context are crucial for understanding the tensions and developing strategies to address them. In Lebanon, past events, sectarian and political identities, the role of media, our geographic region, gender differences account for variance in level of perceived security threats over time. Second, social cohesion requires thinking beyond refugee host community dynamics. First, social tensions are multidirectional, as I mentioned earlier about the horizontal versus the vertical definition. It's important to understand that the drivers of social tensions at the micro level, such as economic competition or housing challenges, tend to generate horizontal tensions, that is, tensions between groups. Whereas factors at the macro level, like the access and quality of public services, contribute to vertical tensions, that is, the tension between the groups and the governing body. Second, it's needless to say that tensions existed in Lebanon as a function of political affiliation and religious identification way before the Syria crisis. The Syria refugee crisis thus complicated an already fragile confessional and political balance at the national level. For example, the influence of media on matters of social cohesion in host countries. One of the studies that we looked at explained how increasing contact with people back home through social media and exposure to local and international media significantly influences attitudes towards violence among increasingly isolated Syrian refugees and host communities. We also learned that perception of humanitarian assistance also matters. Understanding those perceptions is especially useful for aid agencies to begin thinking about how their response is intimately linked to community dynamics and may catalyze frictions, escalate tensions, and increase negative perceptions of assistance. External factors also matter. One of the studies we looked at presented a security focus by investigating regulatory incidents such as curfews that are posed on Syrian refugees by local municipalities, and discussing the securitization of the Syrian community as perceived by Lebanese nationals. The study captured different manifestations of social tensions, but also presented external factors that affect security, including that events in Syria, as well as clashes between the Syrian conflict actors and the Lebanese armed forces, could impact their inter-community perceptions. So I'll stop here for now. I'm looking forward to share more during the Q&A, and I will hand over now to Dennis to talk about the experience in Jordan.
Thanks, Aline. Hello, everyone. I will be discussing a bit about World Vision Jordan's work in the Syria response here inside Jordan, as it pertains to social cohesion in an urban host community context. World Vision Jordan has not implemented specific projects to address social cohesion to date. However, we do have a grant that is in the startup phase that does, which I will touch upon later in the presentation. I will speak mainly about how World Vision Jordan is taking some of the recommendations from the recent literature review that Aline previously mentioned and moving forward with them. But first, a brief background of World Vision in Jordan. We've been working on the Syria crisis in Jordan since May 2013. The sectors we work in include WASH, Children in Emergency with a focus on education, food and NFI, cash-based programming, and livelihoods. We work both in refugee camps and host communities. In Jordan, approximately 80% of the refugees are in host communities and 20% in camps. In terms of social cohesion, World Vision Jordan is currently working towards strengthening our programming in this regard. As for the recommendations from the literature review and how World Vision Jordan is using them, let me first start with the final recommendation. Mainstream social cohesion in strategies and operational plans. The organization should envision social cohesion as it pertains to current mandates across humanitarian emergency affairs, peace building, and development departments. As this literature review was being done, World Vision Jordan was in a process of revising its strategy. And one of the things that we did was embody social cohesion into our overall strategic goal. Our current strategy has an overall goal to enhance well-being and promote stability through social cohesion. The underlying objectives are included on the slide. World Vision Jordan considers as a key overall goal that Jordan maintains its social and economic stability, which is critical to the region. Though encircled by turbulent geopolitical events, Jordan has been stable through various turmoils. One of the contributing factors is the king's strength in the country through tolerance, but also firmness. Factors of stability include a steady growth in GDP, strong security forces, stable employment level, a national identity, a legitimate government, and social cohesion. However, the sudden increase in population has had an adverse impact on Jordan's economic, social, as well as institutional stability. Because the increase of risk of incidents of violence and conflict between communities that could undermine Jordan's social stability, World Vision's strategy is built on a core of enhancing children's well-being, as well as preserving Jordan's economic and social stability. In addition, social cohesion matters cut across all the objectives that already focus on ensuring access to and quality of services, improving the social economic conditions, as well as promoting and integrating gender and resilience. World Vision Jordan, therefore, can contribute directly to stability and mutual acceptance of different communities and their ability to share resources as well as services. Strengthened social relations and extended social protection, including child protection services, are also important. World Vision Jordan can indirectly pursue cohesion through a resiliency approach that focuses on enhancing overstretched infrastructure, socioeconomic conditions, and building the resilience of refugees and host communities at the community level. So what does this practically mean? Our past and ongoing projects have emphasized two approaches to influencing social cohesion. The first and main method is indirectly improving communal infrastructure such as schools, and also through improving socioeconomic conditions for both refugees and vulnerable Jordanians by providing provision of services and items such as cash. The second is through more direct secondary activities within larger projects that address tensions and encourage cooperation and understanding. These include community WASH committees, parent-teacher associations, also the work that is done with youth in schools as a side to the education component. This included a film project where youth were taught how to use film equipment to empower them to tell stories. Topics chosen by youth and filmed included bullying in schools, discrimination among the various groups. These films were screened in various schools and community events. There were also numerous inter-school events, including sports events. All of these activities included Syrians and Jordanians. There has also been a significant portion of vulnerable Jordanians included in our programming, anywhere from 30 to 50% when working in the host communities. This, I have to mention, is a requirement from the Jordanian government. The government plays a strong role in ensuring humanitarian aid is also directed towards vulnerable Jordanians, much more than many other countries I've experienced, which leads to the diminishing of tensions often caused by aid. All projects targeting refugees require approval from the government, and there is a requirement that a minimum of 30 to 50% of beneficiaries are vulnerable Jordanians. You may ask why the range? Well, it's something that isn't set in stone. There's often a push to see the limits of the NGOs and the donors, but there's the idea from the government that all projects contribute to the balancing of aid between refugees and host communities. Also, World Vision and many other NGOs are coordinating more and more with ministries, either by choice or guided through government systems. The ministries are playing a greater role in coordinating actors alongside the UN. Granted, some ministries are stronger than others. And I should also mention that the highly centralized nature of this process can lead to tensions itself between various levels of government, the local and the central. So moving forward, our plan is to focus efforts wherever possible to design and implement programs that target social cohesion directly, while maintaining our indirect influence as well. World Vision Jordan attempted in the last couple of years to secure funding for projects that directly focus on social cohesion. However, it wasn't until recently that we were able to secure funding for 3 years and taking a more direct approach to social cohesion with programming targeting youth in schools as agents of peace building. But even this project also has an element of strengthening common infrastructure with rehabilitation of community centers and WASH infrastructure in schools. This project will also form committees that will be housed within the renovated community centers. They will be trained in various peace building tools and will work towards various social cohesion campaigns at the local level. This will also provide World Vision with an opportunity to gather more information, to monitor the situation in these communities and provide guidance to feed into future programming. As was mentioned in some of our past programs, there have been secondary activities that have attempted to build cohesion among the refugees and host communities. But we haven't been systematic in mainstreaming it across all our programs, which basically means putting a filter of social cohesion for all of our projects, which includes really analyzing what has worked previously and how can we replicate and adapt throughout our programs. This is the next step for us, and having a project that focuses on this issue will assist us in gathering those best practices in a more systematic way. Now, under the recommendation to strengthen social cohesion research, there are 2 sub-recommendations. The first being conduct more in-depth longitudinal research on the impact of matters of reduced social cohesion across multiple vulnerable demographics. Previously, World Vision has project-specific monitoring and evaluation questions that sometimes address issues of tension and cohesion, but it varied from project to project based on whether there was a component of social cohesion or not. Sometimes we collect anecdotal feedback through focus groups discussions, but we haven't been systematically collecting data on this issue. World Vision is looking into how we can incorporate more ongoing and systematic data collection of tension and social cohesion within our programmatic areas. Part of this included a recently completed impact assessment across our operational and programmatic areas, which will even be combined with other World Vision offices across the Syria response, which include Turkey, Lebanon, KRI, as well as Jordan. This impact assessment included questions on community relations, discrimination, etc. This can serve as a baseline for us moving forward here in Jordan. We've also recently conducted a Making Sense of Turbulent Context assessment, which is a participatory tool to analyze elements of tension and conflict at the country level for planning purposes, which we will use to help guide our strategy. Moving forward, we are looking into developing a few questions, indicators that can be incorporated into all our assessments, monitoring, and evaluation exercises so that we can gradually collect information throughout our operational area without doing a specific assessment or on social cohesion. This would then be strengthened by more detailed information gathering on our project elements, focusing specifically on social cohesion. Collecting this kind of information, however, is a sensitive issue here in Jordan, and these types of inquiries require careful framing. This can be a challenge for NGOs here in the country. Second recommendation under strengthening research is to highlight positive case studies or case studies of good practice. World Vision has been collecting positive case studies, but not so much for the purpose of developing communities of practice. They have been more anecdotal and meant to highlight the positive impact of our projects. The next step for us now is to move towards case studies of good practice, which is more analytical of our methodologies versus simply highlighting our successes. Starting our new project will help us in this regard in designing a more analytical approach to assessing our impact on social cohesion across all our projects. And then we need to link this up to World Vision's global structures that already exist. Final recommendation that I would like to highlight is to improve programming approaches to social cohesion. Specifically, collaborate with NGOs and other partners that are members of regional and national strategic response plans. World Vision has been participating at various working groups, both at the national and the local level, in order to harmonize approaches and set standards for working together and dealing with overlaps. Here in Jordan, World Vision also feeds into the RICE, which is the Refugee Assistance Information System. This is a database managed by UNHCR that is meant to track all assistance to registered refugees. It is meant to eliminate duplication and facilitate the provision of aid by multiple actors in a complex urban context. Part of the difficulty is that it doesn't take into account the vulnerable Jordanians, which account for a significant percentage of beneficiaries in the host communities. Also, as I mentioned before, is that more and more NGOs are coordinating with government structures. While all these structures assist in the coordination of aid in the host communities, which have an impact on hopefully addressing social cohesion, it is a secondary result. I guess the question moving forward is how can social cohesion have a more prominent role through these coordination mechanisms? In summary, World Vision Jordan has understood the importance of assisting in maintaining stability in Jordan at various levels. We have attempted to incorporate programming when possible to positively influence social cohesion. However, we haven't mainstreamed it into our operations. We are currently in that process now and have been using this report basically to assist us in moving forward and taking on those recommendations and sort of bringing them into our into our operational framework moving forward.
Thanks so much both to Aline and to Dennis. We really appreciate hearing about your work so far. I'm going to hand over straight away to Bob to tell us a bit more about the work that CRS has been doing in Central African Republic.
Well, thank you, Leah, and let me say thanks to Dennis and Aline for a very interesting presentation. I really like the emphasis on the studies and the documentation of social cohesion initiatives, because I think to learn and a lot to share across the theoretical field, as well as those who are on the ground implementing, and the practitioners who really can benefit from this information as they implement programs. So thank you for that. Good day to everyone who's tuned in. I really appreciate your being with us today. I'm going to talk a lot about our experience in the Central African Republic, which I will refer to as CAR. And as with any case study, the tendency is to get almost lost, if you will, in the richness of the case. And I could speak really for hours about the Central African Republic and social cohesion, but I've done my best to try to sculpt this and craft it in such a way that we focus more on the urban context than the rural context, even though we implement social cohesion activities up-country in very rural settings. But we've also done considerable amount of work in Bangui, the capital, as well as in 3 or 4 urban centers around the country, including Bosangoa, Boar, and Boda. I'm going to briefly set the scene of the Central African Republic. It's probably not a country many of you are deeply familiar with. I certainly wasn't until I started working there. My first trip was there in 2006, and we've been conducting social cohesion work there for the last few years. I joined CRS about 18 months ago, and so my role at headquarters has been to lead a team that provides technical support and backup to our country program in Central African Republic, and to work closely with them on our social cohesion initiatives. I was recently there in February with the team to assess and review the work we've done over the last couple of years in social cohesion, and so some of that will figure in my presentation. But a few quick facts about the demographics, the physical, social characteristics of the country. It's a country of about 5 million people, roughly the size of the U.S. state of Texas. It's landlocked, located in the heart of Africa. It became independent from France in 1960. And there are some 80 ethnic groups in CAR, but only 4 of which can claim to have greater than 10% of the population. And you probably could distinguish 3 large groupings of ethnic groups in the country. But basically the bottom line about ethnicity is that there is no one single dominant group. And so you don't have that type of cleavage in the country. And from an ethnicity standpoint, there's a lot of overlap and similarity, intermarrying in the country, and people stand really to benefit from harmonious relationships and getting along with each other, cooperation. There is a national language, Sango, which unites the country, and a small portion of the population also is fluent in French, which is the colonial national language, and tends to be the language of government and business in the capital. Approximately, and this is very approximate, 60 to 80% of the population self-identifies as being Christian, about 10, 20, 30% as Muslim, and then there's the underlay of African traditional religion. And like most African countries, CAR has a very youthful population. About 40% of the population is 15 or 14 years and under. And the urban-rural split is about 45 urban and 55 rural, with several urban centers that probably have 30 to 50,000 people. The capital of Bangui has about 500,000 people. Now, for physical and social geographics, I think it's important to note here, because of the conflict, the recent and still ongoing conflict in the country, that CAR ranks 187th out of 188 on UNDP's Human Development Index. There's a life expectancy of about 50 years at birth, and most people are just living above the poverty line. You have literacy rates as low as about 50% on average, and far lower for women. And in this area, the neighbors, Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of the Congo, you have similar conditions, similar rankings on the UNDP's HDI. And so in some people's view, this is not a good neighborhood to be living in. It's very much the root causes of violent disputes and conflicts. Let me say a brief word about the crisis in CAR. The country, the most recent crisis began in November of 2012 when a loose coalition of rebels called Seleka, which means alliance, began attacking and occupying the north and central parts of the country. Peace deals were eventually struck, but mostly failed, and then the rebels took over Bangui in March of 2013. The counter to the Seleka rebels, or guerrillas if you will, Balaka forces, and anti-Balaka means anti-machete, and they attacked or countered the Seleka forces in clashes in upcountry as well as in Bangui. The fighting at times has been extremely vicious and marked by looting, pillaging, indiscriminate killings, and at the peak of the fighting in 2014, some 3,000 people were killed. Close to 1 million people were displaced, and some 200,000 have sought refuge outside the country. In the most recent outbreak of violence, which was in September of last year in Bangui, some 75 people were killed, many homes were destroyed, and about 42,000 people were displaced. So you can see that it's an extremely volatile environment, and characterized by a lot of instability, displacement, movement, people who have had to flee and leave their homes and property. And it's been devastating for the economy as well. Presently, the situation is that the government still lacks full control of the countryside. There's a fair degree of lawlessness that persists. The militant group, the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, continues to destabilize parts of the country, especially in the southeastern part of the country. And there's been a fracturing and a factionalization, if you will, of some rebel forces, and new rebel groups have formed and may still be forming, joining with remnants of the Seleka, the ex-Seleka, and the anti-Balaka to control villages, towns, and certainly in the northern, northeastern, northern, and central parts of the country. So that gives you a thumbnail sort of overview sketch of the demographics, the social, physical, and the crisis that has died down recently, but still impacts to a very great extent social cohesion in urban and rural environments. I think what's key to note here about social cohesion is that the crisis has created a religious divide or a conflict between Christians and Muslims in CAR, which previously did not exist. And so the tendency amongst donors and practitioners and even academics is to characterize and frame the conflict as a religious conflict between Muslims and Christians. I think it's far more complex and far deeper than that, and there are many other types of cleavages that exist in the country. But given the last 3 years and the intensity of the crisis and the violence that was carried out by the Seleka, which are largely Muslim affiliated militias, and the anti-Balaka, which are mostly Christian affiliated. The crisis and the result for social cohesion really is that it's cast and framed the divide as one between Muslims and Christians, and that needs to be taken into consideration in the types of programming we do. I'm just going to mention very quickly a few of the social cohesion initiatives in CAR, and there are many, but USAID funds a few very significant ones. Search for Common Ground implements a project called Zo. Mercy Corps implements Aspire, and then CRS implements 2 or 3 programs. We just completed a program under the SECC SEC, which is the Secured, Empowered, Connected Communities, which focused on social cohesion training in Bangui and social cohesion awareness raising, training, and connector projects upcountry. We're launching, and we've been awarded a large Global Development Alliance award from USAID with funding from foundations and other donors as well, called the Central African Republic Interfaith Peacebuilding Partnership, CIP. And I'm happy to say that World Vision is our partner with us on this project, as is Islamic Relief, Aegis Trust, and others. The purpose of the CIP is to strengthen the institutional capacity of the interreligious platform of CAR to improve livelihoods and to address trauma healing and peace education in the country. And you'll see the photo there of the 3 leaders of the interreligious platform. You have the Archbishop, the Imam, and the head of the Protestant Association picture there. And then CRS also does some integration of social cohesion with livelihoods. We're intending to do the same thing with emergency shelter. But this is an initiative that's important to our agency because we've made the integration of justice, peace building, social cohesion, governance, and gender an agency core competency. So we feel that in order to achieve our greater objectives, we need to be able to integrate social cohesion, justice, and peace building into our core sectors, which are health, agricultural livelihoods, and emergency response. Well, is social cohesion a silver bullet or a scapegoat or somewhere in between? Probably somewhere in between, but I thought I'd give you a catchy title anyway. I'd like simply just here to note that one of the studies we co-conducted with Harvard in Haiti lends credence to those who strongly believe that social cohesion contributes to peace, stability, productive relations within and among adversarial groups. Our Harvard study has really affirmed that, and this was done in 2 separate urban communities in Haiti, really affirmed that social cohesion strengthening activities increased resilience in both of the communities studied. But it also could be considered a predictor of resilience, so that communities exhibiting a greater capacity for social cohesion were also more resilient. Now, to some of you, this finding is just going to seem like, well, it just confirms what you already knew, which reminds me of what one of my research and statistics professors told the class once. He said, well, social science merely confirms 90% of what you already know. So there you go. But it is nice to have studies like these and the ones that World Vision has conducted to confirm some of the things we think we know and believe about the impact of social cohesion on such things as resilience. I'd also like to mention here the work of Tanya Pfaffenholz and her colleagues in an edited volume they produced in 2010, where Pfaffenholz basically concludes that, based on the case studies, that social cohesion initiatives generally are not all that effective in the way that they're carried out through donor funding. And the reasons have to do with socialization, where children are from a young age indoctrinated in home schools, places of worships, and so forth, about who they are, who their group is, and what the other is, and it's very difficult to change some of that thinking in a project of short-term duration. Then there are peace agreements, which also have a tendency to divide rather than unite people. You have the externally driven nature of social cohesion work, which often attitudes and behaviors and beliefs that have taken many years to take root. It's very difficult to change all that in a few months or a couple of years. And then there tends to be a focus on group relations rather than the underlying reasons for conflict. So we tend to take, in the example of CAR, the Muslims versus the Christians. And yet there may be very significant other causes of conflict that tend to get neglected because of our focus on these major group relations. And then finally, Poffenholz mentions that social cohesion is often an outlet for donors because it's extremely difficult to pressure host country governments into taking action that they should take to prevent and mitigate violent conflict, or to address the injustices and the indignities that exist in society, which can be at the root of violent conflict. And so funding a social cohesion program tends to replace perhaps other work that should be done. Anyway, I wanted to juxtapose two different studies just to give people a sense of some of the considerations that we all need to be aware of as theoreticians or practitioners of social cohesion. You'll see here a group of women who are members of the women's wing of the interreligious platform of CAR and in Bangui, and they have been extremely influential in bringing women of the different faiths together to raise awareness of the need for conflict mitigation, of harmonious relations, of cooperation between and among different groups. And they've gone to the radio and used that as a means to communicate their messages, which have seemingly had quite a bit of impact. We've also, they're part of the training we've conducted in Bangui. We've also trained many people, I'd say hundreds actually, of civil servants of a mid to senior level in the various ministries, departments, and agencies of the government. And I'm very happy to say that the leaders at the very highest level in CAR have came to CRS and requested that we offer this training in social cohesion to their professionals at the mid and senior level so that they could also influence their families, colleagues, and associates in Bangui. And then finally, we've also been very consultative with leaders in the private sector who are directly concerned by the degree of social cohesion in CAR society as it affects their business. Over the course of our work, we've developed various tools. The main tool, the first one, is applying appreciative inquiry to the 3 Bs. We call it the 3 Bs, 4 Ds for short. I'll talk about that in a minute. The second one you'll see on the slide, social cohesion integration diagnostics application tool. That's a tool to assist a country program to assess its readiness to implement social cohesion activities or to integrate social cohesion into their existing portfolio. The third one is an adaptation CRS has made from an existing barometer which gauges and measures people's attitudes and opinions about their own perceptions about social cohesion in their neighborhood or workplace, as well as what they perceive others to think. And so that's been a very fun, exciting, and interesting tool we've used in workshops, and we're now, it's in draft. We're working on producing a more formalized version of that tool. It's got about 18 indicators across 3 different categories. And then finally, you have the training modules that we've used over the course of our training. The last one, the Busy Guide for Busy Practitioners, the basic guide for busy practitioners, is a tool we developed for conducting quick but thoughtful assessments of governance, gender, and conflict. So here you have the methodology of the 3 Bs. I'm sure many of you have heard of the 3 Bs, especially the bonding and the bridging, but let me just say a few words. The binding at the bottom there is the process that occurs inside an individual, within an individual. So it's reconstructing the way a person views him or herself. And so it's introspective, but it's sort of getting yourself, set straight so that you can take a more constructive and productive approach to your dealings with people in your own identity group or from the outside. Trauma healing would fall into this category, and we've had a huge demand in CAR for that. The bonding is the relationship strengthening within a single identity group, and then the bridging is developing trust and bridging the divide between adversarial groups. Over the course of the training, our lead trainer discovered that many of the participants were simply unable to envision a better future for the country. The crisis had affected them so deeply, and it's quite tragic, really, when you sit in a workshop and you hear people talk about losing a son or a daughter or a close relative or a friend to the conflict. That's when it really hits home about what social cohesion work can do to help people. And so our lead trainer took the principles of appreciative inquiry, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with, the discovery, dream, design, and deliver, and applied them to the 3 Bs, and found that made the journey from the head to the heart so much easier and quicker for these participants. And so what he did was he put together this matrix, and on the left you'll see the 3 Bs, the binding, bonding, and bridging, and across from left to right on the top you'll see the 4 Ds of appreciative inquiry. They're not exactly called the 4 Ds there, but the appreciative view is the discovery, and then the vision is the dream, and then appreciation of building together, that's the design, and then engagement for action is the deliver. And what I've done here is I've just left a few questions in these participant reflection and small group work about, what do I have inside me that's positive, for example? What's the dream of our group for our country? What should we do to improve intergroup relations? What intergroup traits can we build upon for social cohesion? And what can I do personally that would make my society, my neighborhood, my workplace better? So that's sort of the methodology, and all of this it's final, but it's in a draft in the sense that we're translating the document, which was originally authored in French, and it's being translated now into English, and we hope that it will be released and put into the public realm in a couple of months. So briefly, the impacts we've seen in Bangui. I'm just going to give you a quick example from the 7th arrondissement, where you see pictured Imam Idris and a former anti-Balaka officer. That arrondissement, like many in Bangui, was severely impacted by the fighting and the conflict, and there were clashes here. The young man to the right there led attacks on Muslims in that arrondissement, and they destroyed a local mosque. He participated in the social cohesion training, the 3 Bs and the 4 Ds. He was so affected distracted that he couldn't sleep. And he finally requested a meeting with the imam and asked him how he could reconcile, could he beg forgiveness and change his life. And so what we found was that he and the imam came together and were able to find funding to restore that mosque. Upcountry, we've seen various impacts of maybe not quite as powerful as that, but one I'd like to mention is where Muslims and Christians have come together in a remote area to form a committee that governs livelihoods for pastoralists who are basically Muslims and the agriculturalists who are essentially Christian. And that has had extremely good impact. So just to draw a couple of contrasts between urban and rural experience, we've seen a rapid pace of urbanization in Africa, and yet cities in Africa tend to resemble like very large villages. The difference is that people who have migrated to cities have lost their connections to their home regions, their culture, their language, and so forth. And so they tend to group together in cities, which isolates people from each other. So it's very difficult to build up that social capital that you need and then bridge it so that you've got high level of social cohesion. But what we found through our trainings and our work is that we can leverage the influence of government, of civil society leaders like the Interreligious Platform. We've trained up a group of people as trainers, the TOT, and built up the institutional capacity of the IRP and others to carry on this work. And then in a rural setting, we've seen that by working through justice and peace commissions of the Catholic Church, for example, we can develop and reinforce social infrastructure, reach a lot of people, and people can engage in connector projects for mutual beneficial cooperation. So finally, let me just say thanks to USAID for making this work possible. They really had to scratch and claw to get the funding because CAR was not necessarily high on everybody's priority list. But I would be remiss also if I didn't say thanks to our chief of party out there, Dries Mamane, and our lead trainer, Jean-Baptiste Talla. There are many other people I'd like to thank, but they know who they are. And thanks to all of them, this work is making a difference. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob, and again to Aline and Dennis as well. All very interesting presentations, and I don't want to waste a single moment, so I'm going to jump straight into our Q&A portion. The first question we're going to ask, I'm going to jump to Aline, but we had a request for a repeat of the definition that World Vision is using for social cohesion. So before, Aline, you answer this first question about the role that social cohesion can play in contributing to resilience in urban settings, I wonder if you can also just begin your answer by repeating the definition of social cohesion that you shared with us at the beginning, just so everyone's got that clear, and then go on to the part about resilience. Thank you so much.
Let me start, before stating the definition again, let me start by thanking Bob for the rich presentation. It's great to see that there are so many tools existing out there that CRS is already using, and this will be very, very beneficial for us in our next steps of operationalizing what do the recommendations of our literature review mean for programming in the field. So thank you, Bob, for that. Regarding the definition, what we found out in the literature review is that social cohesion can be defined as the nature and set of relationships between individuals and groups in a particular environment, which we are calling horizontal social cohesion, and between those individuals and groups and the institutions that govern them in that particular environment, which we refer to as vertical social cohesion. In the literature review, you will find more details and elaboration on that, but this is the main definition that we're briefly using. Now, going to your question, Leah, about the role that social cohesion plays in contributing contributing to resilience in urban settings. To create resilience in urban settings, we must invest in the capacities and the resources available at the community level and in the institutions that are mostly affected by crisis, so they can eventually be equipped not only to deal with their immediate needs, but also with their longer term ones. The resilience approach recognizes people in need as active and creative agents and empowers them toward greater ownership and betterment of their own lives through rapid employment generation, life skills training, and inclusive governance. Social cohesion can be seen here as one of the drivers of this outcome. If we think back of the definition that I just repeated on the vertical social cohesion, we can see clearly how through strengthening institutional capacity of local level authorities to be able to understand and address social tensions between refugees and host communities can lead toward building local resilience and ownership of response for more sustainable solutions. But at the heart of this endeavor, and I repeat it again and again, we need a thorough understanding of what factors are driving the tensions between the communities, because those are different from one context to another, even within the same country, and what solutions are more likely to bring the communities together rather than contribute to fueling the tension. So to build resilience in the urban context affected by conflict and crisis, from the societal perspective, is to have a shared system of meaning between diverse communities living in the same space, to have solidarity, integration, and trust among members of different communities within broad and inclusive governance. So applying a social cohesion approach to programming in those settings can help in leading to improved urban resilience. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Aline. I'm going to jump as well to Bob for this one and see if he has any thoughts to add.
Yeah, thank you. I think really Aline covered the ground very well. What I would add is that social cohesion really is needed in urban humanitarian response, because if you have, like Aline and Dennis pointed out in their presentations, if you have large refugee populations, you have displaced populations that coexist with host communities, that's a recipe for conflict. And so it's extremely important to conduct social cohesion activities there. But not only for displaced peoples, but for just generally, because of what I mentioned, that groups that most urban population have very short histories living in the places where they are in cities. They're only a few years away from having migrated there, maybe a generation, but their links still are very strong to their home regions, and therefore they feel isolated, they don't feel connected, they're fearful of the other, there's a lot of mistrust, there's a lack of cooperation, communication tends to get miscommunicated and transmitted in ways that are not helpful, and that can inflame feelings of mistrust or hate of another group. So this kind of work in a social, in an urban setting is extremely valuable.
I want to jump straight to the next question. This is another one that came in advance, and I think it plays on the kind of perhaps recognition that social cohesion might be recognized as an important thing to do, but how important is it in a short-term kind of context, especially when you have maybe a funding context where people are expecting certain things to get done in the short term, which is seen as the emergency response, and seeing other things as longer-term interventions going into recovery or even development interventions. And so I'm going to go to Dennis first to explore your thoughts about, do you think, how important is addressing social cohesion in the short-term emergency kind of phase of a response?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm getting from what's already been discussed is, each context is so different. So when you ask a question like this, you really need to really look into each context. But so, for example, you know, in the situation of CAR, I mean, of course, when you're dealing with emergencies and the donors, it's often, at least in the short term, about life saving, right? So that really depends if you're in, you know, if the context is actually in conflict or was recently in conflict, such as CAR, where social cohesion can be more defined as a sort of life-saving element to prevent further conflict. It is certainly much more difficult in a situation where you're in a stable country, let's say in Jordan or Lebanon, where it's a refugee population that's come in. So yeah, that's where most of the money goes in towards shelter and these life-saving skills, and it's not even until sort of later on when it becomes a protracted crisis where tensions are starting to rise, that it's kind of then viewed as worth looking into. I think the way that we've approached it here, at least in World Vision Jordan, is sort of putting it as secondary activities within larger programs. It seems to be much more palatable for the donor if you're, instead of a $500,000 or $1 million project on social cohesion, if you're doing something that maybe costs 20 or 30,000 that deals with elements of social cohesion, it kind of helps us, and that's how we've done, at least in the first few years of our operations, is putting it into larger programs. Now, it wasn't until recently, as this particular conflict is in its, it's finished its 5th year and so on, that a new set of donors are coming in with a much longer term perspective. And so this is where we've managed to actually secure funding for 3 years that deals specifically with social cohesion and peace building at the community level. We have been submitting these types of proposals throughout, but have not had anybody sort of bite on it up until now. So I mean, that's how we've approached it here in terms of being able to deal with a much more emergency-focused response.
Great, thanks, Dennis. We wanted to give an opportunity for everyone to weigh in on this question, so we've launched another poll on this question just to get a sense of what you all think. There's only so many characters you can have in the responses, so by SD I do mean social cohesion, and please take a quick second to let us know what you think. The next question we're going to go to, I'll just give a warning to Bob, because I'll turn to him first, and it has to do with what do we need to have a successful community-led or community-involved social cohesion program in urban humanitarian response. I'll leave the poll going though and come back with the result of it after we hear Bob's thoughts on the question.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I would say it's important that this not be seen as an externally driven, donor-led type of activity. It's got to be owned by the community, and that applies to rural as well as urban. It really doesn't matter. And so it's important to find champions for this in the host community, leaders or citizens who want to bridge and form connections, and that can help mobilize others. We found in the town of Boda, for example, that the Women's Association was an example where they were able to bring Christian and Muslim women and leaders together to approach NGOs and intergovernmental organizations like IOM and the peacekeeping MINUSCA, and ask for social cohesion programming. That was amazing. But activities need to should be integrated to the extent that they can be, so that they're not simply standalone, but people will see them as vital, life-saving type of interventions that impact their livelihoods and their lives in a very positive way. So I would just say that, to conclude, the social cohesion components need to figure as much as possible at the beginning of a response. And so if you do a quick conflict assessment and you're thinking about what can social cohesion do to address some of the issues that come up in this conflict assessment, then you can begin working on them. So you, for example, training using methodologies like the 3Bs and 4Bs right away, and then getting a connector project off the ground, because that takes a lot of discussion, consultation, and planning, as well as time to implement. So getting that started is important. Identifying who the key stakeholders are. If there are other organizations that are working in your area, in your town or your neighborhood, who are they? What are they doing? How can you complement each other and not work at cross purposes? I know coordination takes time. It's not free, but you have to do it. And then just keep the emphasis on community-led. And like Aline said, you're bridging horizontally and you're linking vertically. So don't forget that you want to bring in government in a vertical way to link citizens to their mayors or the municipal members of the council. You want to link them to markets. So bring in the business people. Don't neglect them. The private sector has an important role to play too. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Aline, do you have anything else to build on this answer?
Yes. So building on Bob's response, I would like to categorize the approaches into four main recommendations to keep in mind for successful community-led social cohesion programming. And this is based on the literature review as well. So the first one being adopting cross-sector area-based approaches in urban and non-camp settings. So moving away, as I shared previously, from the beneficiary-centric and the sector-centric approach to support local municipalities and local organizations to provide public goods and services like the education, health, water. So moving away from the traditional approach of NGOs and aid agencies as basically aid providers, and including vulnerable members of the society in this equation, and not developing basically standalone programs addressing refugee only or Lebanese poor only, for example, in the case of Lebanon. Such approach can empower local actors and increase the likelihood of sustainability because they reduce the creation of artificial and parallel market systems. The second recommendation would be to empower local actors, specifically by working with both refugees and host communities to create equitable solutions to alleviate tensions over distribution. So, for example, in designing livelihood projects, there should be equal participation from both communities to take leadership positions, and activities should be cooperative rather than exclusionary in nature. Such approaches might improve perception and relations between both communities, contribute to more inclusive social networks across the communities, and strengthen the local governance mechanisms in short and the long term. The third recommendation would be to be very sensitive to the tensions over resources, but also tensions over identity, territory, and security. So this calls for a greater communication, transparency, and accountability by the humanitarian community. And the fourth recommendation would be also, as Bob said, to liaise with community leadership and security officials at the local level where tensions exist in order to resolve disputes and settle tensions arising from different things such as service provision and access and economic competition. So the international NGOs can facilitate establishment of more community-based organizations and community councils with representatives from both host and refugee communities. Such networks can diffuse the tensions through local capacity building and conflict resolution workshops. That's all.
Great, thanks, Aline. Before we go to the next question, I'll just take a second to share with you all the results of the last poll. So as you can see, most of you felt like social cohesion is one of many important aspects, with quite a few of you as well also thinking it's a priority, and equally those thinking it's somewhat important. So I think the third answer in the middle there seems to be the overall consensus on this one. And I think what our speakers have said in terms of it being an answer that perhaps is context specific is quite an important point as well. And I think that some of the tools that Bob has shared about how you can understand the degree and perhaps importance of social cohesion in the context you're working in could be quite useful. One in terms of considering how important you should prioritize social cohesion and addressing it during the response. So we'll move to the next question, and this is one that's come in during the webinar itself. So the question that's come in is about the security context, so including the presence, the degree to which armed actors are present, as well as policies to do with crime, and the overall kind of a sense of security in one place can affect the amount of social cohesion. So I'll turn for this one first to Dennis and see if you have any thoughts about to what degree the security context might affect social cohesion, and whether there's anything that us as humanitarians looking to address social cohesion might do or be aware of in this regard.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of working with refugees here in Jordan and maybe also in Lebanon, we try as much as possible not to have or violence from security forces from the context that the refugees are coming from. It's ideal to try and keep you don't want too many people that they'll have would it be an aversion towards people in uniform possibly, or armed. So in general, we try and maintain through all of our activities a very low profile in terms of if there's any security requirements in terms of distributions and so on. That being said, in Jordan, the government and the security forces here do have a very strong handle of the situation in country. They have good control of the borders. They have good control over the communities in terms of policing and so on. And it's a very professional sort of security force. So that certainly helps to alleviate let's say the fears that Jordanians may have of moving into an insecure relationship with so many refugees coming in into the country. So yeah, I mean here in Jordan, I would say that the government has a good control, and it does allow us to implement, and for the most part, it does help in keeping stability within the local communities.
Great, thanks so much. Well, as we only have a couple more minutes, I'm going to go to our last question and turn to Bob for the final word. Considering this is something that you've been working on in CAR and other contexts for quite some time, how do you monitor progress in social cohesion? How do you kind of check that any interventions you've made kind of are having an impact, or whether the situation has changed over time? Do any of the tools perhaps that you shared earlier with us address looking at social cohesion over time? And as well, because you're our final voice today, if you have any concluding thoughts on the topic overall, please feel free to share those as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of developing good monitoring and evaluation tools for the program of the social cohesion component of the SEC project. We have utilized proxy indicators to give us a sense of the evolving context for social cohesion. We did a baseline study at the beginning of the project a couple of years ago, and the team is conducting, maybe has already conducted, the end line study, and then we'll be comparing the results from when we started to where we are now. And that particularly will be important for the urban centers upcountry like Bosangoa and Boar. Then we probably have a pretty good notion too, based on the assessment, the internal review we recently conducted. And this is this was our methodology. What we did was we brought in staff and volunteers from the project areas into workshops where they could debate and answer a number of questions having to do with the changes that they've seen, observed, been part of, or lack of change for that matter, over the time that they've been involved with the project. So that helps us triangulate the results of the baseline and the inline. Then we're in the process of conducting, very near the end now, a major in-depth conflict analysis for the country. And the design of the analysis takes into consideration the kinds of work we've done in Bangui and in these urban centers upcountry. So that will give us a sense of where do things stand now in terms of the social cohesiveness of the country, given the context of latent or active conflict in some areas, others that have stabilized, and life is returning somewhat to normal as it was before. So I think it's a combination of these methodologies and tools which gives us as accurate a picture as we can get of the sort of the qualitative, mostly qualitative results. You also have the social cohesion barometer, which we've utilized in a very unscientific way. We haven't conducted, scientific random samples of the population with this tool, but it could be utilized for that. And I think that's the direction we want to move in with this tool, because up to now we've gotten a picture from the participants in the program about their perceptions and opinions about social cohesion and how things are evolving in their neighborhoods, workplaces, places of worship, and so forth. But I think it's a tool that has applicability on a national scale if it's applied in the right way to get a much more, accurate and more scientific snapshot of where things stand in terms of social cohesion for any given country, for that matter. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. I have 3 quick points before you all leave us today. The first is to say thank you so much for the speakers and to you all for listening. The second quick point is that we added the article that CRS and Harvard did that Bob mentioned in his presentation to the handout. So that's there, as well as the World Vision Social Cohesion paper. And we'll make sure that there's a link to it, as well as the other paper that Bob mentioned and any other resources that were shared by participants during the webinar as well, in the transcript and recording that we share in about a week's time. The final thing to say is that there's so many more questions we didn't get to. We've got questions here about social cohesion in different contexts, social cohesion, different groups, as well as the role of faith and faith organizations in social cohesion. And the good news is that we do have a way to continue the discussion. We have our urban community of practice where you can contribute to the discussion on these and other topics to do with urban response going forward. So if you haven't already joined the COP, you will get an invitation after the webinar. And we look forward to hearing all of your thoughts and experiences on these and other issues there, as well as at our next webinar. Thank you all again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.